Welcome to Simployer TV, live from Oslo Business Forum. In our current work environment, there are now 4 generations working together. We are going to talk about what for some is the war of the ages, and for others the secret ingredient in a well-functioning organization. With us today, Dr. Eliza Tilby, generations expert. Welcome.
Hello.
Just a quick reminder, what are the 4 generations at stake here?
Okay, so we have 4 generations in the workplace, and we start with the baby boomers, really born in the aftermath of the Second World War from 1942 up to the mid-1960s, and they are still clinging on to power. They are still very much working, some of them into their mid-70s. Historically, we are having a whole swell of older people still in the workplace, and they came up through the ladder with traditional hierarchical structures, may have addressed their boss as sir, very classic corporate, I would say staid corporate culture. Next up we have Generation X, born between the mid-1960s and 1979, and they saw 2 crucial kind of shifts in the workplace. The rise of professional women in the workplace, so gender diversity was a big thing. The birth of what was known as work-life balance, taking into account your social and parental responsibilities and how it balanced with your work life. So paternity leave for that generation was the big shift in Norway. And then next up we have those pesky millennials, who were born between 1980 and 1996. And they obviously witnessed the rise of the smartphone, fluidity between work and leisure, the mass expansion of higher education. They're the best educated generation in history. And thirdly, the democratization of cheap travel. So they want to travel and work at the same time. So what's Monday to Friday, more boring week? What's 9 to 5? They want flexible working where they can work from anywhere in the world. And then next up, the new generation coming through is Generation Z. And the important thing to learn about them is they cannot remember the 20th century. They can't remember it. They can't remember 9/11. They can't remember, the world before there wasn't a black president in the United States. They can't remember a time before there wasn't gay marriage legalized in most places. So they have a very different mindset, and they are truly the social media, tech-savvy generation, the digital natives, for whom digitalization is a core part, not of their lives, but more crucially, their identity. And they are very different from millennials. So you have 4 different generations coming up through the workplace, operating in the office, all with different ways of communicating, wanting to learn, thinking about their career, thinking about retirement, thinking about the workplace and career in very different ways.
Yeah, because I was going to say that this sounds like a whole lot of challenges. But are there any positive side effects to this generational gap as well?
Yes, I think that age diversity, i.e. having a multi-generational workforce, is as important as gender diversity and ethnic diversity, because actually you want the combination of the experience of boomers and X's and the enthusiasm and the ingenuity of millennials and Gen Z. All different ages bring different traits, skills and talents and perspective to the work environment, and you need to have that diversity. I've been working with tech startups where they are all millennials, they're all under 30, and actually they've recognized, a lot of them, that they need that experience of age, they need that wisdom, and so they've been actively recruiting older workers to diversify their workforce. Now there's also lots of different things that you can do to create harmony across the generations. The first thing I do a lot of with companies is what I call generational intelligence, helping actually the old understand the young and the young understand the old. So really actually educating them on how they, what the workplace looked like for boomers when they started, what the world looks like for Generation Zers who can't remember the 20th century, what you can do to just aid understanding. That's the first thing. And the next thing you can do is put systems in place, such as a skill swap. We are facing a workplace now which is quite unprecedented. Young people know more about the technology that is being introduced than the older people that have been in the company for, say, 30 years. So you need equally to recognise the skills that older generations have. Knowing how to use the telephone would be one, where you skill swap. Generation Z are teachers as well as learners in the workplace, and should be. boomers equally are learners as well as teachers in the workplace. So skill swap, I've seen reverse mentoring systems work really well, helping people to understand, work together and appreciate that combination that is necessary for a successful workplace, which is experience and enthusiasm.
I'm sure there are many business leaders who have all these challenges at hand and don't really know where to start, because you have a lot of things you can do. But where do you start when you see that you do have a generational gap?
That's what I think. I think the first place is recognize the problem, right? So awareness is the first way of dealing with a problem. So recognize the prejudice that exists, I think, in your organisation, whether it be prejudice against the young, so managers going, oh, those pesky millennials, they want, feedback every day, or they're always on social media, or they don't appreciate or know how to pick up the telephone to a client. Recognise that prejudice, but also talk to young people and realise that that's two ways. All those Gen Zers that turn up on their first day and email the CEO with all their great ideas. You can't do that. You've got to learn to respect the hierarchy and the procedures within an organisation, because that's what's made the organisation successful. So I think recognising the problem is the first thing. Secondly, what I call process of generational intelligence, as I said, helping the ages understand each other better. And really, when you're talking about a multi-generational environment, you're basically talking about a family, right? And we know that sometimes the workplace can feel like a really tense Christmas dinner around the family table. And you've got to think about, how can you bridge that gap? How can you bring ages together by skill swapping, reverse mentoring, putting all sort of systems in place. Career-long learning, I think, is really important. As people are working older, they need to recognise they're going to be learning for a lot longer. So lifelong learning is absolutely crucial. But all these things can, once integrated successfully, can actually make all ages feel part of the organisation. And I think the danger is when you're talking about generations, you tend to focus on the young, and actually you will then end up alienating the old if you sweep through all these changes to please the younger demographic. I think it's really important that you look holistically at the challenge.
I'm just going to round off my final question. What about the market approach when customer experience? Because you have people working in a company, and there are several age gaps there, but also in the market. How can we prepare for meeting another demand in the market as well, not only at the workplace?
Yes, so I think within the marketplace, I think it's a brilliant question, because it's crucial, is that, and this is why age diversity in your team needs to be there, because it will reflect the age diversity in the market, because you now have baby boomers who are the fastest growing demographic on social media, spend the most money on eating out, spend the most time in the gym, spend the most money on travel, okay? So they are aging differently than old people did before them. You've got millennials who are now parents, who are now married, who are now homeowners, who are now looking to their 40s and the age of responsibility and burdens. You've now got Gen Z who are moving into their 20s in a very different way, thinking about money differently to millennials did at their age. And so that demographic needs to be fully understood. So in order to appreciate that, and I would add one more to that, is the multi-generational family is now one of the biggest marketing spaces, I think, that is going to really challenge marketeers thinking about how do you attract across the generations. Because now actually people are living longer with their parents, more three generation households are becoming more and more common, and so actually don't just think about one generation how it's changing, but actually across the generations. So if you're going to have age diversity in the workplace, that is going to help your age diversity attracting the different consumer.
I think this is our cue. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Eliza Tilby.
Thank you.